Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters number 352. And we've got a new guest that we haven't had on the show. And this is somebody that I work with quite a bit, especially over the last year and a half. We've done some really cool projects, which we're going to talk a little bit about. But before we do that, we're going to go through and introduce ourselves like we always do. And you will see that Josh isn't here. He is sick. So unfortunately, he's not going to be with us tonight. But hopefully he'll be well again. And I think he hosts next time, and hopefully he's well enough, because I think we want to do like a year-end wrap-up or something. So we'll just see how that goes. But as far as me, I'm Scott Circlin. You can find me right here on my channel on YouTube, where you will also find Making Comics 101. It is my series on how to make comics, everything you need to know from coming up with your ideas to printing, publishing, and everything in between. I say it's the most comprehensive course you're going to find for free on YouTube. So definitely check that out. You can also find my stuff at my website, circworks.com, where I have digital products. Right now, I think they're like 25% off or something like that. So definitely check those out. I've got digital products that will, they come with tools and templates and all kinds of things that are going to help you create comics. So that's what I do. What about you, Corey?
Well, I do all kinds of weird stuff, but it's all kind of based around trying to get people to think about things. So lately I've been doing a series of illustrations called Esoteric Crumble Flux about different ways that society could end. So I just did my take on AI. So if you want to see that, you can go to CoreyKerr.com or jump into my email newsletter, CoreyKerr.com/email, and look at the most recent episode, which is also the video portion of that is up on YouTube. So, and all that's just on my site.
Awesome. Now to our guest, Gary Berman. So Gary, you want to introduce yourself and kind of tell everyone what you do?
Well, I relate to you, Corey, regarding AI, of course, standing for artificial intelligence, because all of my intelligence is artificial. And Scott's a good example of that. I sometimes refer to myself as the Forrest Gump of cybersecurity because of this sort of bizarre journey I got into this world of digital hackers and criminals and real life unsung cyber heroes who kind of toil in anonymity to keep us safe at work, at home, at school. It sounds a little bit like a comic right there, but the stuff I deal with is all real life, and my mission is to kind of help people stay safe online on their digital devices. And our website is cyberheroescomics.com. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And Gary, so your story is kind of interesting, how you did get involved in cybersecurity. It's an unfortunate story, but it kind of led you to where you are. So I don't know if you want to dive a little bit into that and give somebody a little bit of that backstory.
Just a little bit. I owned a marketing consulting company, unbeknownst to me, right under my nose. Some insiders set up a shadow company and basically stole my corporate identity by what's called spoofing a website and redirecting telephone calls that came into our exchange to an exchange that they had set up, and I ended up losing in aggregate several $1 million. And it wasn't just me. We had to lay off about 100 people. So kind of due to the difficulty of attribution, because it's very easy to be anonymous on the internet and very difficult to work with law enforcement to prove things, I went through all the stages of grief. I was pretty angry for a long time, and then I didn't believe, then I said, well, why me? And all these crazy things. And finally I ended up saying, being a victim is just exhausting, and it's not unique. Unfortunately, there's so many victims in life. All of your listeners have challenges and things like that, for sure. So I decided to pivot to become an advocate. but there were a couple problems. Is beginning with, I had no idea what I was talking about because technology is incredibly complex. I was terrible at computers, let alone, trying to delve into this digital universe. And so through a series of coincidences, I can actually show you the source of my superpowers right here. These are conferences. I went to 54 cybersecurity conferences in 4 years. My wife thought I was just batshit nuts. I ended up wearing a superhero costume because, I realized that this stuff is way too complicated for me and everyone, and that there had to be a way to sort of pivot from, fear, uncertainty, doubt, which are these normal things when you deal with hacking and all that stuff, to fun. So I came up with this idea. I'm going to pivot from FUD to fun. And I happened to see Spider-Man, some years ago, and this light bulb went off. Superhero comics. And the only problem with that is I had no idea about that. So to wrap up my little intro, I went to my first Comic-Con, and I had on a tan jacket, a white shirt, khaki pants. I had my backpack with my computer because I had no idea what a Comic-Con was. I learned quickly because as soon as I got out of my car in the parking lot, this lady with green face and antenna and these giant butterfly wings says, "Sir, I think you're overdressed." Well, that was the understatement and my entrance into your crazy world. So I'll stop there.
That's great. So kind of fast forward a little bit. You mentioned to me a couple of times your introduction to kind of cybersecurity was a book, Cybersecurity for Dummies, and how it wasn't as easy as you thought, but eventually you kind of through just one. And I mentioned before the show what your real superpower is just connecting with people, I think. And you've got, I don't know, how many people do you have on LinkedIn? How many contacts do you have on LinkedIn?
Yeah, that's a really cool story because I didn't know, not only did I not know what I was talking about, I didn't know anyone. I mean, other than I started meeting people at conferences. So one day I decided to go to LinkedIn, which is not something I had really used very much in my career, but I just did a search and I typed in the name the title Chief Security Officer, and I got all these people. And so one at a time, over about a 9-month period, I invited them to connect with me and asked them to send me real life stories of cybercrime, answering the questions, like what happened? What were the consequences? What were the lessons learned? And last time I checked, I have over 24,000 connections with the most important people in the world in cybersecurity, in Department of Defense, all the branches of the military, law enforcement, academia, giant corporations, little companies. I mean, it's just nuts.
Yeah. And so before we kind of met each other, you sought me out, which is, again, that was basically you seeking people out, introducing them to what you're doing, bringing them on board,
right,
and creating partnerships with people. But you had done a handful of comics already before you met me. And then I guess you found me through the Making Comics 101 on YouTube, I think, is where you found me, or the comic, or maybe it was the Comic Maker Toolkit, actually.
Yeah, that's right.
And you were like, "Oh, this guy seems to know what he's talking about." And so
wait, don't pat yourself on the back. I mean,
I'm saying,
it was just a search online. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, the thing that attracted me to you, which is why I'm sure your viewers, are attracted to you, Corey and Josh, is, you're like regular people, and I found you to be incredibly approachable, and I loved your passion and enthusiasm, which is not something that many of us have, because, my whole thing and how I related to you right away was this idea that when we're children, we're wide-eyed and everything is like, whoa, how cool, a giraffe, and, like everything. And then life happens.
Yeah.
And so what I figured out, I don't know if I figured it out, it just kind of unfolded for me, but people in my industry in cybersecurity and technology are stressed out. It's a very thankless mission, because the criminals never stop, and the good guys, the good people, can't actually win. They can sort of stay even. And so the thing I figured out, just to wrap this up, is, to say thank you to them. So I made it my mission to shine the light on the unsung cyber heroes, who toil in anonymity at work, at home, at school, like I said earlier, and I made that my thing. And that's why I got all those connections on LinkedIn, because I happen to tap into this inner child, and everybody's need to be thanked. And that's what I related to you. You are an inner and an outer child, Scott.
Corey, were you going to say something?
Well, and it's interesting because if they're doing their job right, then nobody notices anything because nothing has happened. Because
That's right.
They prevented it from happening.
That's right. That's nail on the head on that one.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, it is tough, because the stuff that this industry, that our industry deals with is like serious. This deals with nation states. I host a show also. I've interviewed people about Russia multiple times. I just did some shows on Ukraine recently, China, Iran, Cuba, Venezuela. And that's just the national security bucket, let alone how do you protect the prying eyes of a webcam in your daughter's bedroom? You know what I'm saying? This is real life, and we're just working on a show about TikTok, which right now, the federal government is passing legislation to ban the federal government from using it, and they're going to find a way to, try to dial it down, because your data, if you use TikTok, is going right to China, and that cannot be a good thing. So my stuff is serious, and that's one of the interesting things, perhaps, Scott will get in, how can you distill complicated and even scary technology information into, something people can get their heads around, into enjoyable stories that still teach, the things that you want to communicate. And that's, where Scott, you and the team did such an awesome job with us.
Yeah, it's interesting because Will Eisner did that. I'm sure, as you know, but I don't know if everybody in the audience knows. Years ago, during World War II, he was doing comics and everything, and then was drafted. And he said, "Hey, instead of giving me a gun," said, I bet I could save more of your soldiers' lives by drawing."
That's right.
They said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, what are your biggest problems?" They said, "Well, nobody's reading the manuals. So the tanks are blown up, or their guns are misfiring, or people are getting injured and hurt and killed sometimes because they're not following the procedures." And he said, let me test out a theory. And so he started this, I forget what he called it. I think it's PS is the acronym, but it was a publication that was a comic book where it would have some idiot that would blow himself up or something because he didn't read the manual, and then some attractive lady would walk out and teach the principle of how to clean whatever part that just blew up or whatever. And anyway, they saw an actual marked difference in accidents and casualty every time he would produce a comic on something. The rate of failure of that thing would drastically decrease.
Wow. I didn't know that. I had heard of him, but I did not know there was data, or at least, qualitative information about the effectiveness of it. But it doesn't surprise me, because the other thing, and you guys are much more expert than I am about this, but in my experience, we created a handful of comics. They went very well within the cybersecurity sort of community. The responses that we got is really exactly what you're saying. That just teaching what's sometimes referred to as basic cyber hygiene. And in our industry, the word hygiene has a double meaning. And you see behind me, I have this character called Vernon the virus, and if you can see it, and basically this was before COVID, so it wasn't like viruses were in the zeitgeist, or the consciousness of the world like they are now. So at that time, you hear what? Computer virus, I mean, and everything that emanates from that. So this concept, so we did a comic or a little strip, I think it was, but just equating computer viruses with human viruses and the common characteristics, so instead of, just let's say washing your hands, you practice that kind of hygiene with certain techniques on your digital devices and things like that. So it's great to hear that it helped, and we hope that our work helps. That's the idea.
Yeah, and I'm glad Corey brought that up, because and this is one of the things, part of the topic I wanted to go into is some of the struggles we had with sort of, because we're dealing with industries that are because it is such a serious thing that a lot of times they're looking at comics as just like a kid's medium. And no matter what you see around you, like when you went to the comic convention, Gary, how many kids were there versus adults?
Not many. It was almost all adults.
Right, exactly. And so that's kind of a hurdle we have. And I think, and one of the projects we're talking about doing next year is because we've created a couple of comic books to kind of educate people on cybersecurity, and we want to do more. But that hurdle of a lot of these, and we've had projects where we were halfway through, it just got, somebody at the top was like, "Hey, comics are for kids. Why are we doing this?" And they just stopped the whole process. So we've got to kind of get around that. I'm gonna mute my. I got the dogs.
No, don't mute the dog. I'll go back to this topic for a moment, but don't mute the dog. And the reason, you don't want to mute the dog is a barking dog was inspiration for a character we created.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which is a combination drone and also a dog, and we call this character Drog, D-R-O-G.
Yes.
And basically, the Drog's mission is to fly into the scene, into the panel, and impart actual wisdom. So it's sort of like a fourth wall sort of narrator. This Drog. There's the little Drog character and stuff like that. So. But going to your point about, and I would love to hear your thoughts about it. I mean, there is research that shows that when you have a visual medium or a multisensory medium, it through functional MRIs activates different parts of the brain. And where, there are people, and I don't want to speak out of turn because I'm really quite ignorant about this, but there are many people with cognitive issues who, when they hear music or they see a drawing, can just nail it, and it's because of what I'm saying. So I don't know what you all think about that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were going to chime in, Corey. If not, I'll just. Okay.
I wasn't sure if I was muted because I have pianos and harps playing it upstairs.
Pianos and harps and dogs. It's right. No. Yeah. I mean, there's and I've talked about this before with my struggles in school, because the way because I was I got C's and D's for the most part. And in school, I just thought that, I'm not very smart, but it took me getting out into the real world and kind of figuring out other ways to learn. And a lot of that was visually, until I was able to kind of find ways of teaching myself and educating myself. And I learned that different people learn different ways. And a lot of people do learn visually, and not just that, but I think going back to some of the issues we've had as far as people not being, as far as looking at comics, having this preconceived notion that comics are for kids or everything. Most of the people, at least, especially in the Gen X, kind of my age group, and younger, and even older. I mean, I go to conventions. I know a lot of people. My dad grew up with comics, and a lot of those people, they still enjoy that stuff. We got Gary Hodges says, I cite studies in my work often regarding the value of visuals and conveying information. And yeah, so Gary Berman, our friend Gary Hodges, he's a courtroom illustrator. So basically, he designs visual aids to help prove the city's case in court when it comes to crimes or whatever. So
that's so interesting.
Yeah. So and it's not. I mean, I think one of the things we can go, because I think the people that we're kind of dealing with, I think they understand like infographics, and I think if we can explain, we can do kind of what infographics do, but add a storytelling element to it, which is even taking it a little bit further. And we've talked a little bit before about how the industry, their kind of go-to are just these PowerPoint presentations, these boring PowerPoint presentations, and how something like a comic, something that you can hold in your hand, something you can take with you, something that people are going to be interested, something that's different from the average PowerPoint presentation, how that's going to, have an effect on people, and people are going to get interested in it, and it's something that I think they're actually going to read and learn from.
Well, I mean, just to quickly build on that point, so much so, we created a character called the Presenter, and she's based on PowerPoint, and she has an amulet that hangs around her neck and basically shoots PowerPoint slides, and her superpower, she puts villains to sleep.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which everyone who has ever either given a PowerPoint or been the recipient of one has had a version of that experience and stuff. But one other thing I just want to say, and I'll be quiet, is the challenges that we have, like with this last project that we worked on, also had multicultural elements into it because it was from a country outside of the United States. And so the whole idea of cultural interpretation or misinterpretation of comics is a very interesting topic. And so that we're not too hard on ourselves, Scott, they did just request 6 additional comics for next year. So that's great.
Right. Yeah. We'll talk a little more about that, because we did, we did, that project was not easy. And again, a lot of it's kind of educating the client and stuff on like that. So, hopefully we can make it kind of a win-win for both of us, but we have to definitely make some changes and things.
What's on your screen now?
I don't know. Corey, did you pull that up, or did I actually?
Yeah, so this is Preventative Maintenance Monthly, which is the Will Eisner comic.
Okay, so Corey, we're just seeing a screenshot of StreamYard. I know. Can you not see still?
I still can't see, but
okay. We just had a screenshot of us.
Well, never mind. I was flipping through. I was adding visuals to what you guys were talking about. I'm gonna put this in the chat. I don't think I have the bandwidth to do anything. So here's the.
Yeah, I like. Thanks for doing that, Corey. It's very interesting.
Let's see if I can. Now I might not know how to pull it up. Let's see. Okay, I don't. Let's see.
So if you go to present at the bottom.
Well, it pulled up in a different window. So how do I get it to?
Yeah, that's okay. So just go back to the StreamYard window.
Present. Okay.
Click on present.
Yeah.
And it'll ask you, and then you jump back over to that other tab.
Okay. Share screen. And how do I think this is the problem you had.
Oh, no.
Entire screen. I'm not seeing another tab. If I had another monitor, which I don't because I'm on my laptop, I could do it.
Well, I'll put this in the
Okay.
public chat for everybody to look at. But this is
Okay.
what I'm about to put in the chat is the VCU library of a bunch of screenshots of that Will Eisner comic that they use, and apparently this is still, he started this publication during World War II, and they're continuing to do it today.
Oh,
Wow.
awesome.
Oh,
Yeah, that's great
amazing.
information. So anything like that, I think because like I said, we want to put together a comic book that kind of that shows the value of what we're trying to do as far as, companies and organizations and how comics can help get their point across. And we did it pretty successfully, I think, with the last project we did, and that's something we want to continue to do. So
I saw one. Forgive the interruption.
Yeah, no.
Just relating to that, I saw one maybe last year or two that was put out by Marvel, actually honoring the unsung healthcare workers.
Yeah.
Which I thought was terrific. It showed real stories of different healthcare workers, doing what they do day in and day out, and it was a great way to shine the light on them.
Yeah, and I mean, we had a project that we were working with that had a healthcare theme to it as well, and that was unfortunately the one that somebody at the top was like, we're not going to do this anymore. So, but I mean, there's definitely other organizations out there, and this is, I mean, it's too bad because that comic book was really awesome, and I don't know, maybe we did
one. We did one called "Defending Your Health." I think about it, which we were showing the vulnerabilities within a hospital or medical clinic or things like that.
So
that hacker.
This is the one you did this before I kind of came on board.
That's right. Yeah, defending your health. Yeah, and so we depicted real scenes in hospitals, and think about that for a minute. Let's just say something like you cannot get an electronic healthcare record. I mean, just think about what that does if you have to do everything on paper, and someone cannot get treatment in an emergency room because those resources were diverted because they couldn't get into their computers, and we're just so addicted to our technology, we just take it for granted that this stuff works, but hackers, they have ransomware, they shut down systems until you pay and things like that. So anyways, but I'm a huge advocate and very interested in learning more from your audience and your colleagues about the different use cases to create comics or graphic novels to distill complicated stuff to help educate. It was a great example you brought up, Corey. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there's always been, I grew up and there was a lot of PSA comic books like Spider-Man talking about don't smoke and stuff like that, or don't do drugs.
Exactly.
Like that. So we've had that. So that's always been there. But again, that was kind of geared more towards kids, whereas the stuff Eisner was doing was geared towards soldiers, which adults. I mean, if you're going to fight in a war, then
that's right.
You're an adult at that point. So I mean, I think it's more. I think that's definitely something, and I'm so glad that Corey brought that up because I mean I was aware of that, but for some reason I didn't kind of put two and two together on that, because I think and one of the reasons why we were talking about this and how it relates to our audience is that so many times I think as comic creators we have this kind of narrow view of what comics is or what it can be. And it's always like, oh, how do I get a job at Marvel or these other companies? When in fact, there's other opportunities out there, many of them more profitable than working at a Marvel or DC or working for a Marvel or DC. But it's maybe not as glamorous from the outset. Like, you're doing educational comics, but as you can see, I mean, I would hold this up against like any, the artwork against any kind of Marvel or DC style. I mean, the artwork, everything. I mean, this is top-notch stuff. So you can create your own opportunities. I mean, there's plenty of people out there that can use a comic book for whatever message they're trying to get out. So I as far as our audience, I just want to put that out there. So don't limit yourself to just like, oh, comics is just this one thing. There's many opportunities out there. Sometimes you have to create those, and that's kind of what Gary and I are trying to do. Is create.
Well, this is an interesting thing, though, because like if you think about the gifts that people have, none of us have everything. So you have to hang out and align with people who have, kind of complementary skills. So for your audience who are creators, and storytellers and have those, gifts and skills, you might have to, not have to, it'd be a good idea to seek out someone who's a little more oriented towards being able to market it, or to be a salesperson, for the concepts that you're doing, because I have not met anyone anyways who can do everything. Plus there are only so many hours in the day. So, when smart people get together, good things happen, and so I think that's a tangible piece of advice that I'm following by hanging out with you guys. Even though we've done our own comics, they're not as good, and as what we can co-create together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So kind of, I guess, moving forward. So we've had this experience of working on this comic here, and again, it just came out amazing. We've basically had our kind of mission, the things that the points and everything that we needed to make as far as cybersecurity and everything. And then we created a story around that. We built this great team of, artists, pencilers, inkers, colorists, letterers, and all that. And really created this fantastic product. And that's one of the things we want to do moving forward, because there's so many other industries that I think could benefit from this. Now you're obviously, Gary, I mean, you're well connected as far as cybersecurity, and that's, like I said, we've already done one. The last one we did was centers around this smart city, or what they refer to as a cognitive region. But we've dove into doing them in the healthcare industry for cybersecurity. But there's all these different industries, and that's just where cybersecurity kind of touches these different industries, and it touches every single. I mean, if you're living on this planet, you're on the computer, then it's something you have to be concerned with.
Well, just on that point, and then Corey, I have a question. Something I want to take advantage of the fact that you're an animator as well. I have a question about that. But so for example, I've had on my podcast the global head of cybersecurity for General Motors, like 4 times. And if you think of a car, it's not really a car, it's a computer with wheels on it. Forgetting autopilot or those claims and all that stuff. This a basic, 2-year-old car or something has over 100 million lines of code in a car, so just think about cars. How do you educate, someone who buys a car about that, so you can use this, you can use graphic novels and comics across everything. It just requires, I think, what it is that you really want to communicate. And the thing about the comic creation process that we deployed is, you can maybe do 3, possibly 4 key takeaways that you want the viewer or the reader to experience, just because of life and how, information overload and stuff. And the most challenging part, one of the most challenging parts for us, is how do you decide what you want to really communicate, and how do you know if you've communicated it well or not? That's a real challenging part. So Corey, I'd like to ask you, help me understand the challenges and opportunities associated with moving from, comic or graphic novel into full motion animation. Like what's that all about? I know we don't have enough time, but
Well, I can talk about some of the benefits of both, because I think both are really good for different reasons. So really early on, probably, let's see, it's 2022, so maybe 18 years ago, I had a client, and I'm under NDA, so I can't say too much, but they were trying to describe a metallurgical process that they were doing, but because they're using molten metal, nobody had seen it because it was happening contained, right? And so I had all of these metallurgical engineers, about 6 of them in a room, and they were arguing about what it looked like. And basically what they were trying to do is explain what was happening, so that they could get some venture capital investment, right? And instead of, what you would imagine engineers, they're like, well, let's get out, let's write a 40-page paper about it,
right.
Whatever. And so they had tried this stuff and none of it worked, right? And so then they hired the company that I was working for at the time to produce some graphics. And so we did because it was 2004 and I was 24 and didn't know what I was doing, rudimentary animation. But the nice thing about it was I was able to synthesize what everybody in the room was saying in my sketchbook and say, is it like this? Is it like this? And then finally they said, half of them were like, I don't think it's like that, but it could be like that. Perhaps like, that's the one I think, so like we came to a visual representation that could easily show like a color-coded heat map of the process that they were doing. We animated that right now that I feel like, because there needed to be motion to explain the transfer of heat, like the thermodynamics that were actually happening to the metal at certain stages, animation made a lot of sense. But in other situations, I think comics make a lot of sense because you still get the visuals, but sometimes when you're not controlling the speed that you're consuming the information, you can get a little lost. And so if something is a little complicated and somebody's talking like that, if I'm reading a comic, I can go reread a paragraph. I can look back at a panel. I can compare one panel or get 4 panels into the page and then be like, wait, I thought I understood that, but now I don't, and go back 4 panels and then, okay, it makes sense. So in a lot more in control of their experience in a comic, but there's no motion or sound. And so I think when you need motion and sound, for example, processes, I think animation is really good at describing processes. And so every time I'm listening, like lately I've been really into kind of like what's happening kind of in the tech space with different things, kind of a lot of what you're talking about, Gary. And so in my mind, I'm trying to think of like, how would I explain this to my dad or my grandpa? You know what I mean? Like, how would I explain this to, somebody my age or younger who's tech illiterate, or something like that. And I see it visually. And oftentimes that visual will move because it's going to be like, it goes from here to do this, or it changes this way.
Wow.
Things. And so when something is moving, I feel like animation is really good. But if something is complex, and it has interdependent steps, I feel like comics are probably a better interpretation of that. Both of them are excellent at storytelling. And I think storytelling is, without getting too existential, like deeply ingrained in the human experience.
Right.
And so I can tell you a bunch of stuff, right? Or I can tell you a story that involves those things. And if I tell you the story, you're going to remember it. So yeah. I teach university. And if I want the students to remember something, I will tell it to them in a story, because they will remember the story more than they'll remember the fact.
What may I ask what you teach?
I mainly teach visual communication. So I teach in the communication department, and I teach graphic design, illustration, animation. And then I also teach some capstone courses in digital and social media.
Wow.
I'm
You did not, when I first started talking to you, you did not seem that smart. No, I'm just saying. Should I not have said that? It's
Oh, you
remember,
should.
it's like it's 1 o'clock in the morning here or
I like
whatever.
hearing that stuff. That's good stuff.
No, that I mean that's incredibly compelling, and I think one of the and I'm ignorant about what I'm about to say here yet again, but to me, the number one of the top skills that young people, that all people need, is exactly what you just said: the ability to tell stories, to be able to simply communicate effectively, and with social media and emojis, which by the way is just hieroglyphics 4,000 years later, but we are. Let me ask you: you would know? Are we losing that ability to tell stories and communicate effectively?
I think there's a pretty good argument to be made that we are losing the ability to have nuanced communication. I don't think we're losing the ability to tell stories, but I think those stories have become more polarized. If you want a really interesting book on that topic, it was actually written in 1985. I just did a video last week where I quoted a bunch from it, but it's Neil Postman and the book is called "Amusing Ourselves to Death." Yeah, and he has an entire chapter in there where he talks about a literate society versus an illiterate society.
Oh,
The claim is that we are largely an illiterate society today. Even though most people can read, the way that we process and think has been basically dumbed down by television, because he went to like I think it was Douglas. It's not Franklin Douglas, but whoever Lincoln was debating with back in when he was running for the
president. Lincoln Douglas are the
Lincoln Douglas. Okay, so there was a very complex series of ideas that were given orally, and there were callbacks to something that was said 2 hours ago, and everybody in the audience was able to follow along because their brains were wired for reading large blocks of text in a very complex, dense way. Whereas I was raised in the 80s, and so frenetic video imaging and quick cuts, and if a shot lasts longer than 4 seconds, I get bored and look away from it. My brain is not built to hear or read really dense, complex, and long form topics. And so I do think from a communication standpoint that we are becoming more succinct and easily distracted in our communication. I don't think we're losing the ability to tell stories by any means. I actually think that is like a biological imperative. I think storytelling is the human equivalent of genetic memory. So like a bird, within a couple days is up and about. Within a few weeks is flying, and hunting and whatever. They have ingrained in them, a lot of the animal kingdom has ingrained in them the ability to just do what they need to do. Humans have adapted it in a more creative and rational way to where we tell each other stories that teach the lessons that we need to know. And so that's why the early cave paintings are of very grounded, realistic things that needed to be told. Let me tell you the story of how I took down this mastodon. Let me tell you the story of how, I avoided, this predator, or what they were doing is they were using comic books, visual storytelling, sequential art to convey biological imperatives. Like, to survive, you need to know these things. And if you look at every culture, every ancient culture in the world, they have some sort of creation myth where this is how our people came to be. Mm-hmm. And there is a ritual, usually a dance or a song or some sort of presentation of that creation myth, because codified inside of that story is a set of beliefs, and this is who we need to be, right? To function as a society, our social contract within this tribe, within this people, within this nation, within this whatever, we believe in this, and this. and they tell each other the creation story by way of saying this is who we are, right? And so if you look at the Greeks versus the Egyptians versus the Japanese, they all have that, but because they're different cultures, they have drastically different focuses of those creation stories. And so storytelling, I think, is like a quintessential part of being human. And I think if we ever lost that, we would probably still be primates, but I don't think you could call us human anymore.
Well, I don't know if you heard that sound, but that was my brain exploding.
I think one of the things that I took away from what Corey just said was that because we were talking about how this latest comic book that we did was for a different culture that we kind of had to do a little educating ourselves on.
Sure.
But in that, what Corey was mentioning was that every single culture, they have these visual story. They've told their history or whatever visually. So it's something that relates the comics, visual storytelling, sequential art relates to anyone, no matter where you are. So, I mean, there's and again, you can tie that back into what we're saying about the opportunity for artists. Think of that as far as, because a lot of people, again, have their sights set so small that, comics are just this one thing, when in fact they're so much bigger. You just have to kind of use your imagination.
In addition to relating to like where you are, I would also take something I got from your work, Scott, like when they take place. Like what is time? Can this be long into the future? Could it be way in the past? Could it be a combination of those things? I mean, I thought the work and the way you talk about that is just really brilliant.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm trying to remember specifically. I mean, I did.
Well, it was that I was just quoting you. That wasn't my thought. Okay. Come on. I don't do. I do superhero. Cybersecurity. I mean, no, but that was the idea. What temporally, you can adjust it to anything. Depending on what you want. I mean, one of the things I'd like to ask you guys also, just while I have you, even though I'm not the host of this show, but
well, you're just used to be in that mode. You've done a number of your own podcasts, so I can understand.
Yeah. I've done over 300, but it's only about technology. So, but that is fun for me. So this whole idea, like where do you start? Scott, in your books, you talk about plot and the whole sort of process of going through it. But I always sort of wonder, where does the germ of an idea come from?
Yeah, well, for me, for the projects that we were working on, again, there's an agenda. There's information that the client has to get across. So for me, that's where it starts. I look at this. These are the points that have to be made, and I try to figure out what's an entertaining way to tell these, so it's just not like blah. Here's information, and it's just boring, to wrap a story around it. So usually I'll take. So we need to talk about ransomware. How does that fit in the story? What event could happen that leads to a ransomware attack or whatever? And some of it, we mentioned our little character Drogue is this combination of a robot dog and a drone, and his sole purpose is to kind of break the fourth wall and talk directly to the audience. So, and to either put a pin or put a kind of to highlight something in particular that's going on in the story, or certain times there's sometimes where you just have to tell exposition, but do it in an interesting way. So, and we don't want to lean too much on that particular device, because we want some stuff actually going on with the characters in the story. But that was sort of an interesting way that we something that we created so that we can say, here's a little bit of information here and there just to sprinkle in throughout to go along with the story. But for the most part, it's just a matter of taking the ideas that we have to get across, and it's almost like a puzzle piece. Like here's all the things that we have to educate whoever the reader or whoever is on. how can we make that entertaining, and how can we wrap that into a story? So then it's a matter of just taking and we've done things where, we had those together and then they've changed, and we're like, okay, now we get to move those pieces around. I don't know if this is too, hopefully everyone's kind of following me, but yeah, it's really just a matter of, for me, I approach it kind of like a puzzle. So
I think what Scott's saying makes a lot of sense. Where if you're starting with the problem, you can kind of grow out from there. What is the one thing that we need, or the solution? What's the one thing that we need to get across here? I'm just looking at some of these. I wish I could pull this up, but there's this Eisner comic where he's got a guy holding up a pane of glass, and he's kissing a girl through the pane of glass, and then it just says, having dirty terminals is like kissing your gal through a plate of glass. Keep your battery terminals clean. And like that, I'm sure that they started by saying, we have a problem with, people not cleaning their battery terminals.
Right.
And I'm sure he said, okay, well, tell me what that means. And they were like, well, stuff gets in the way, or whatever. And it makes it so that connection isn't, it isn't as strong. And so what I would do is I would start doing mind maps, and word lists with connection and, something in between something. And then eventually you can kind of say, oh yeah, when you're kissing somebody, you're making a connection. If something was in between that would stop that. And so then you have this whole thing that kind of builds out of the components of the problem that you're trying to solve. And then how can you translate that into an experience that people have, in real life? So, it was, I wish I could show it, but stream there doesn't work right now. But anyway, if you go to that photo stream that's in that was posted in the chat, you can see that there. But that's kind of how you kind of tackle that type of thing is exactly what Scott said, is what is the problem? What's actually happening? And then is there a way that we can relate that to something? That's how symbolism works, is you just
just to take that example, I wonder what is the sort of balance between kind of style and substance, like between, let's say, humor, as a bridge between those two things. Like how do you know if something is too goofy, or too funny and loses its ability to be effective, and vice versa?
So you're talking message and voice. You have to take into account audience and their sensibilities. The comics that I keep referencing, if you look at them, they're a time capsule. They would not work today. I mean, we're talking about soldiers in the 1940s. And so they're about as sexist as it comes. And there's usually some buxom lady that walks on and explains things. But I mean, that was the message in the audience that was getting across during that time. So you take that into account. And you guys are doing this with, well, let's learn about this culture, so that we can communicate within the framework of who our audience is. And so I would, if you're asking what I do in those situations is, if I am pitching something to somebody, or if I want something, I will tell that thing to multiple people kind of within that audience. And as I'm doing that, I'll tell them like, hey, I had this idea the other day, and I'll just do it conversationally, and I'll tell them about that thing. What I'm actually doing, I'll do this with coworkers before I pitch an idea to my boss. I'll do this with friends before I pitch an idea to the public or whatever. What I'm actually doing is I'm seeing if I can explain it succinctly and well, if there are parts that need more explanation, if there are parts that get a laugh, if there are parts where people are confused, and going through and kind of verbally kind of running that through kind of informal focus groups. And now all of my friends are like, oh, that's why you're doing that. Because I don't say I'm going to run a focus group. I just say, hey, I had this idea the other day. and Josh and Scott and I do this all the time with each other, where it's like, oh yeah, this, and we kind of pitch these ideas around and just kind of talk about them. But conversationally, if those people that you're talking to are in your audience, you can get a feel for whether something's a little goofy or a little weird or too complicated or kind of, whatever. So that's typically how I do it, is usually just kind of run it by your audience.
Yeah, we had some similar instances, like with the project. So the project we were working on was for a Saudi Arabian company or organization or whatever, and we were trying. We tried to be really conservative going into it, and they even they pulled us back a little bit and said, we're trying to go a little different direction with this. We're trying to, they're in the process of trying to bring more tourism into Saudi Arabia and everything. So a lot of the stuff that we went into being very conservative, they were like, pull it back. It doesn't have to be that conservative. So, obviously the client, they kind of know what they're doing too, or where they want to go with that too. So they can kind of, steer you in the right direction as well. But, I thought I think it was probably a good idea for us to go, be a little cautious in the beginning, and then, or you can pull back or add or change or whatever, just depending on all that. But, and being honest with, like we're kind of trying to learn what the line is, and what you're comfortable with and what you're not. And as far as in regards to humor, there's sort of a running gag in the comic that we put with the father and the daughter wanting to go to this concert, and the father constantly was calling this band that she wanted to see by the wrong name, and so a lot of that stuff, there's some callbacks and things like that. It's not like laugh out loud funny type humor, but it's humorous enough, and it's has some, adds a little bit of levity to it. And then, a lot of it is just, and there's quips and things, very Spider-Man type quips between the heroes and villains, which is fun and things like that. So, so that's what we settled on with this particular project, but it just depends. This comic here is basically, it's more of a, it's an action adventure comic, but we could, I think we are dealing with some serious subject matter. But there might be, we could approach one with a lot more humor. We could have like a Goofus and Gallant type thing, where you've got the one guy that's doing everything wrong, and oh, look what happened, and you're not following cybersecurity protocols, and look what happened to this guy. Now do it the smart way. So there's a number of different ways you can approach it, whether it's humor, action, or whatever. We've tried to kind of create that balance, like when, kind of like the stuff that Marvel's doing in the movies, where, there's a lot of action and adventure, but there's also a lot of humor. And it seems like that's sort of a winning formula for them. I know a lot of people think recently they've gotten a little more too humorous. So, but then, who knows? You can
It depends on their audience.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I think that's a great way of doing it. And also humor is contextual. And so in the context, like for example, I will see things at church that get a huge laugh that would not get a huge laugh outside of church, but it's because church is boring. Right. And so you say something moderately funny in a boring situation. It's very
you mean like this moment now?
Yeah. So, it's situational. So if you're teaching,
I'm sure I'm never going to get invited back, so I might as well just be obnoxious.
Oh no, that's fine. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, in that type of situation, if you're teaching somebody something, I think people appreciate the fact that it's like, I could see how this would be incredibly boring. So this being funny is nice,
Yeah.
It's kind of break that up, because otherwise, very few people enjoy reading a textbook or a manual, or rules. Like those
or
are
a
just
PowerPoint presentation.
or a PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, exactly. So.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much what we're, that's what we're trying to do, and that's why we're trying to put it in the form of of comics and hopefully animation too. You know, I mean,
Well, I
there's a
I
lot
think
of
we. I mean, I think based on like how awesome you are, and this conversation is for me to listen and learn to such smart people. I would like to propose that we co-create an animation or a comic that leads into an animation about this idea of the presenter character, because it is something that almost all business people, regardless of like what level you are, have experienced, you know, in one way or another. And pretty much most people have the same sort of visceral reactions to it that they might be able to relate to it. Are you guys open to, you know, brainstorming about that? You know,
Sure.
yeah, definitely. I think that's probably a good way to go. I mean, to begin with, and are you talking about using this? I don't want to go too much into this because, you know, we can talk more about this. We'll do a call or something. But are you thinking more of a way to show clients you can do as far as the comic books, you know, using comics and animation, or is this for?
I think well, we should ask your audience, but you know, I mean, I think, you know, it would be worthwhile to, you know, put a stake in the ground that you can use these mediums as a way that maybe you've just never thought about it before.
Exactly. Yeah,
and in doing so, sort of opening up the aperture for the entire comic creation world and people who are looking to do their own little companies or their own work, or to be hired as part of a team. You know, I mean, I don't know. I'm just again,
we definitely
it's 1 a.m. here, so.
Well, I mean, we've been going for about an hour. I mean, we can, and I'm not sure how your battery's doing on your phone, Gary. I mean, we can kind of continue on, or we can start to, you know, if we want to.
How my body is doing? It's not my body.
Your battery. Your
oh, my battery. I was gonna say, I don't know how my body's doing, but my brain is fried. No, I enjoy it. Maybe more towards wrapping. I don't know. In your format, do you have the ability to bring in audience comments or anything like that?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I don't know if we had too many questions. We've had a few comments, just basically commenting on kind of what we're doing, and let's see.
I mean, I don't know if you do that, you know, as
from time to time we do, especially if we have questions.
Are you thinking about asking the audience something, Gary?
Sure. I mean, you know, why did you get into this field? You know, and I would imagine there's many answers as there are people, you know, but it's just, to me, it's just been such a learning experience, you know, such a unleashing of creativity. I only half joke the first comic I went through was like sensory overload for me, you know, and I would love to see if there are any sort of commonalities or common threads that keep kids just like to draw when you were little, or tell stories. I mean, when does that start? That would be a question I'd like to know, like on average.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
I'm sure it's different for everyone. I've heard kind of my story many times where it's just kind of like you've been drawing for as long as you can remember. Then at some point you discover comics. For me, it was, you know, with stuff like the 60s Batman and reruns and Super Friends. That's where I first kind of discovered superheroes. And then from there, eventually, these characters, they come from comics. And then I discovered comics, and, you know, and I started collecting, you know, superhero comics. And then I eventually found out that you know, this is back when you get comics at a 7-Eleven off a spinner rack, but then I discovered, there's also these comic book stores. And once I went into comic book stores, it opened up a whole new world, because, it's more than just superheroes. There's comics based on just about anything you could think of. You know, and from there, I just kind of became a fan. And at some point, at some point when reading these comics, I realized somebody's actually drawing into these things and writing these things. They don't just appear magically. And then so I started to kind of pay attention to this different styles of comic books. And I started following particular artists because I like their style. And then from there, I like, oh, so now that I know people actually create these books, that's not some weird, that's a weird, wizardry or something like that. And then I started to try to figure out, well, kind of reverse engineer how they do that. And nowadays it's really easy because people are on YouTube and they're showing exactly how to do stuff. I mean, I've done that stuff myself, but back in the day, it wasn't so easy to figure out kind of what tools people were using. People weren't back then. Artists a lot of times weren't that willing to share how they created, what they used. It was kind of carefully guarded trade secrets, a lot of those. So I mean, there were some books. There was like How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way and some other books like that, but it just took a lot of detective work to try to figure out how to create comics, how these guys are creating comics. One of those things for me was something called the Marvel Tryout Book, which was it's a big book that was actual comic book page size, because back then I didn't realize a comic book is this size. But I didn't realize most comic artists draw like 2 or 3 times larger than this, so that they can get all their detail in, and when it reduced down, it's nice and crisp and clean. But this Marvel Tryout Book had actual comic book pages, and it went through the whole process of how you make comics, and you could actually draw on these pages and submit them to Marvel or whatever. And then later I discovered this comic book gallery in Scottsdale, and I would just go there, and I could not afford any of the actual pages because they were a lot of money. But I would just sit there and stare at these the actual pages that they drew on, and you could see all the corrections where they messed up, and you could see all the paste ups where they added the lettering and all that kind of stuff. And then from there, again, you can kind of reverse engineer it and see, oh, I see how this works. And then from then I started to, previous to that, I drew all my comics in pencil. You pencil it, and then there's an inker so that it reproduces well. So I practiced learning how to ink. I would blow up my comics from the actual size up to the printed, the size that people work at, from the printed size to the size people work at. And then I'd put like a tracing paper over it, or like a vellum or something, and I'd practice inking over it and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, it was a lot of. I think the good thing about the way that I learned how to do comics, kind of that difficult, that kind of hard way, discovering all that stuff. I think that's one of the reasons that it makes me able to kind of show other people how to do it, because I don't know, it's a little. There was so much trial and error, and I think some of that is ingrained in, like, oh, I've done it the wrong way. And because if you now on YouTube, where people just show you, oh, this is exactly how you do it and everything, without having to kind of piece things together, I think you might lose some of that. It might be harder for it to connect. So,
well, Corey, that brings to mind something you said earlier about AI, artificial intelligence, right? When we first started, talking, and just in the past week or so, there's, this technology by OpenAI that's just going viral like crazy. The name slips me at this moment, but it's like chat something.
GPT.
Yeah. What do you think the future the immediate future holds with using, artificial intelligence that, if you put in keywords, can craft a story, and maybe even, from an animation standpoint, all the work that Scott is describing, the way that it was done before, can be accelerated, right? Is that a fair
you
premise?
asked the right. Corey is the perfect person to answer this. This might have become a 3-hour show, but go ahead, Corey. This is one of his current topics.
Try to give a short answer. I think we're going down one of 3 paths. I'm hoping it's the last one. One is that this is kind of overblown and it doesn't really do much. We kind of realize, like a lot of technologies, that it was kind of neat, but it doesn't go anywhere. I don't think that one is that realistic. The other one is it's incredibly effective. It gets better and better, and eventually we outsource all of human creativity to robots, and that is an existential threat to society in general. And the third one, which is the one I think is probably the most likely, and the one I'm working towards, is that we band together as creatives to educate people about the value of producing and consuming art made by people, and some of the dangers of having that outsourced into kind of robotic nature, and that we have an ethical, moral, and legal way to produce this type of technology. Because right now, it's not doing any of those three. And so I think that it is definitely going to be part of the future in some way, but I think the way that we decide to handle it now will kind of determine how that's going to be.
What a brilliant explanation. I'm doing a little pivot live here in my own brain, which is maybe a mission that we can all get behind is, rather than, let's say, the presenter in PowerPoint, we focus on this question and create something that is educational and shines the light on these questions and these scenarios.
It depends on what your goal is with that. Because the presenter thing, I think, is a really good sales pitch, and I think you'd have a pretty immediate return on investment when you're talking about the amount of money invested into that and the amount of money that you could get in closing deals. The AI is more of an existential, futurist that doesn't have a direct business application, other than to say, let's lobby Congress, let's go talk to the EU, let's put some guardrails around this thing so that we're not putting entire populations of people starving in the streets, that we're not automating huge parts of humanity that will cause us to have kind of an existential breakdown, because we're made to be creative as a species. So you remove that, and I feel like we remove a basic part of being human. But as far as like a direct business application, I'm very interested in doing that. That's the type of work that I do anyway. But as far as a direct business application, I don't know if I think that that's as easy to close a deal on. But I mean, there are definitely people out there, groups out there that could use those types of graphics and.
Yeah, I mean, just coincidentally, yesterday a buddy of mine was the lead author on the National Security Council's report on artificial intelligence to the U.S. Congress.
Yeah,
and I was talking to him yesterday about some of this stuff and everything. So I mean, that it is I don't want to say existential per se, but it is a big thing. So let's just do the presenter and make some money.
Yeah. But I also think like the original Jurassic Park movie, when they're taking the tour, they're taking the tour, and they have the little DNA helix,
Mr. DNA,
that's kind of explaining what's going on. I do think that type of kind of live action mixed with animation, mixed with presentation, would be really good, because I've seen a lot of YouTubers get up and talk about things, but it's a lot of just talking heads. I've seen a lot of like academic papers that are written, which are really hard to get through, very interesting, but very hard to get through. But I haven't seen like a Mr. DNA explaining how they mixed frogs and mosquito blood to make, you know what I mean? Like, if we could get into that type of thing, I think that could be extremely useful in that space. I don't know how profitable it would be, but it'd be extremely useful.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, we're going to do the presenter. My wife would kill me. I told you she already thinks I'm nuts. You know, I'm 65 and I wear a cape and a costume. I mean, come on.
Well, we've all got to eat, you know. That's those opportunity costs where you say, which one of these is going to make it so I can pay my mortgage this month? So, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, wait, hold on. I take your meaning and I think it's true. However, I'm just going to have a little bit of a coda to it by saying, you know, you can make money and do the right thing. They don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Well, I think that's the whole purpose of kind of what we're trying to do. Again, we're you know, obviously we want to create an income for us using, you know, comics, but I mean we're doing it in a fun and entertaining way, and I mean that's kind of what this whole, you know, topic is all about. So it's all about creating a win-win, you know, for the you know, so everyone's happy. I mean, the people are educated, people are entertained, and you know, and people are making a living with their art, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So is there anything any like parting words? And what we also do, Gary, as we close out, we'll do kind of what we did in the beginning. We'll kind of go around the room and anything we have to promote or anything you want to say. And then, but before we do that, is there anything that you wanted to say that we didn't get to or anything like that before we start closing it out?
Me?
Yeah.
I would just like to say, you know, thank you for who you are and for what you do and for why you do it. You know, really, I'm incredibly grateful that at this stage of my life and career, I have the opportunity to listen and learn from such incredibly smart and creative people. You know, and I'm too old to have to suck up to anyone. Plus, I'm too tired. So you should just assume what I'm saying is, you know, comes from the heart. I'd like to wish you and your families and your audience a Merry Christmas. And in spite of our individual and collective challenges that we have, we do have much to be grateful for. So I just want to, you know, say thank you to you.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, and so is there anything else you wanted to? Can you hear us?
No, anything else? No.
Oh, yeah.
I think that was a pretty good ending.
Oh yeah. But there's really, I mean, we're already kind of talking because, like I said, we usually promote stuff. But since
I'm not. That's why I'm not a billionaire. I really don't. Okay, so you got me going again. But you know, through my 7 years. Through my 7 years, you know, I essentially in cybersecurity, I essentially donate just about everything. You know, so I did not do this for the money, even though I could use it. You know, it's more of a catharsis and stuff. So I think context matters, to take something that Corey said earlier about that. You know, but having said that, wait, there's more. If you order now, cyberheroescomics.com, you can download our comics for free. You can see some of our interviews about cybersecurity and stuff like that. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn, just Gary Berman. You'll see I'm in a mask and a cape.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant with there's, you know, point people to the podcast and to the comics and all that kind of stuff. So
thank you for that. Yeah.
Absolutely. What about you, Corey? Anything you want to talk about before we
close this thing out? Yeah, if you're into stuff that makes you think and maybe educates you a little bit, check out my email newsletter. I'm not as dumb as I look, and so you can go and check that out at coreykerr.com/email. And there's, I don't know, the last 4 to 6 episodes of that, or I don't know what you'd call that, episodes, newsletters, I don't know, videos, whatever, essays, video essays. I changed up the format a little bit. And so the last 4 to 6 of those, I'm pretty proud of those. So go check those out if you want to learn about different things that we should be doing to avoid massive societal collapse, from everything from bees to AI. I've got a newsletter for that. So.
Yeah, and definitely check out. I mean, those are great essays, and also the illustrations are great. And I'm still waiting for Corey to put some of those on the t-shirt. So
I need to. I've got about 6 to 8 of them now, so I should.
That's awesome. All right. And as far as me, you're on my channel, so that's where you can find me on YouTube. You can also, while you're there, you can find tons of videos on making comics, making a living from comics, all that kind of stuff. Also, my series, Making Comics 101, which is soup to nuts course on making comics, everything from coming up with your own ideas to printing, publishing, and everything in between. And also on my website, circworks.com, you can find a number of, I've got prints and stuff like that, but I also have digital products. Both my comics are in digital form and physical. So you can check those out. Plus my kits, my little packs on, with just digital tools for making comics. Those are all up on my website at circworks.com. And as far as this show, we do this show every single week. And it's a little interesting the way it works, because even though we do it every week, it's not always on the same channel. It rotates. It'll be, last week it was Corey. Next week, hopefully Josh will be well again, and it'll be on his channel. We'll see. But it rotates around each of our channels, and we've got a different guest all the time. Usually we do it a Thursday night, but it can be a different day too. The best way to know exactly when we're going to go live, who the guest is going to be, whose channel it's going to be on, is to join our mailing list for the Artcasters. There should be a link in the description of this video. Actually, I don't know if I put it in this time, but I'll have to remember to do that. But you can check out one of our other videos. There's a link. You can join the mailing list, and usually about 30 minutes or so before we go live, we'll send out an alert for everyone, because YouTube doesn't always let people know. So that's where you can find us if you want to see this show every single week. And other than that, I just want to thank the chat. We had some great discussions and everything going on in the chat. We always appreciate you guys chiming in and staying up late. And speaking of staying up late, I really appreciate Gary staying up late, because like I said, it's around 1:30 almost over where you're at in Florida. So we have a really hard time booking guests on the East Coast, but Gary's a trooper, so we appreciate it. And and thanks everyone again for watching now, and when you watch it on the replay, thank you, and we will see you hopefully next week. See you then.